Chapter 10. On the ground again, with my skirts down where they belonged, my black hat pinned in place to cover my unkempt head, and my veil pulled down to conceal my face, I walked blindly. I did not know what to do. Around one gloved forefinger I twisted a lock of long, blonde-curled hair. The rest I had left where I had found it. I imagined the wild birds, taking it away strand by strand to line their nests. I thought of the mute, enraged message the runaway boy had left in a secret sanctuary. I thought of the tears I had seen on his mother's face. Poor lady. But equally, poor lad, made to wear velvet and lace, almost as bad as a steel-ribbed corset. Not at all incidentally I thought of myself, I, Enola, on the run just like young Lord Tewkesbury, except that it was to be hoped that he had the sense to change his name. Fool that I had been. Coming here as Enola Holmes? I had put myself in jeopardy. I needed to get away. Still, I must reassure the unfortunate Duchess. No, no. I should leave Buzzardwither Park as quickly as possible before Mrs. Holmes. Stiffening, I found myself on the carriage drive directly in front of Buzzardwither Hall, uncertain whether to advance or retreat when a voice called to me from above. Mrs. Holmes! Hiding the lock of blonde hair in the palm of one hand, I turned to see a man in a travelling cloak hurrying down the marble steps towards me. One of the detectives from London. Excuse me for presuming upon your acquaintance, he said when he stood before me. But the lodgekeeper informed us you were here, and I wondered. He was a small, weasel-like man, hardly the muscular sort one expected of a police department, yet fearsome in the way his beady eyes peered at me, like shiny black ladybugs trying to crawl right through my veil. In a rather high-pitched voice, he went on, I am an acquaintance of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. My name is Lestrade. How do you do? I did not offer to shake hands. Very well, thank you. I must say it is an unexpected pleasure to meet you. His tone hinted for information. He knew my name was Enola Holmes. He could see that I was a widow. Therefore, he titled me Mrs. But if I were merely related by marriage to the Holmes family, he might have been thinking, why would Sherlock send me in his stead? I must say, Holmes has never mentioned you to me. Indeed, politely I nodded. And have you discussed your family with him? No, I mean, there has been no occasion. Of course not. My tone remained, I hoped, bland, but my thoughts twittered like a chaffinch. This snoop would tell Sherlock he had met me, and under what circumstances, at his first opportunity. No worse. As an inspector for Scotland Yard, at any minute he might receive a wire concerning me. I had to get away before that happened. He seemed suspicious of me already. I had to distract Inspector Lestrade from inspecting me. Opening my gloved hand, I uncoiled a lock of fair hair, and held it out to him. Regarding Lord Tewkesbury, I said in a commanding manner, mimicking that of my famous brother, he has not been kidnapped. I waved aside the inspector's attempt to protest. He has taken matters into his own hand. He has run away. You would too, if you were dressed like a doll in a velvet suit. He wants to go to sea on a boat. A ship, I mean. In the young Viscount's hideaway, I'd seen pictures of steamships, clipper ships, all sorts of seafaring vessels. In particular, he admires that huge monstrosity, that one that looks like a floating kettle, through the sails, on top and paddle wheels on the sides. What is its name? The one that laid the transatlantic cable? But Inspector Lestrade's gaze remained riveted upon the blonde, curling tresses in my hand. He babbled. What? Where? How did you deduce? The Great Eastern. At last I remembered the name of the world's largest ship. You will find Lord Tewkesbury at a seaport, probably the docks of London, in all likelihood applying for a berth as a seaman or a cabin boy, as he'd been practicing tying sailor's knots. He has cut his hair. He must have gotten some common clothing somehow, perhaps from the stable boys. You might want to question them. After such a transformation, I imagine no one at the station recognized him, if he went by train. But the broken door, the forced lock. He did that so you would search for a kidnapper rather than a runaway. Rather mean of him, I admitted, to worry his mother so. This thought made me feel better about telling what I knew. Perhaps you could give her grace this. I thrust the lock of hair at Inspector Lestrade. Although truly, I do not know whether it would help her feel better or make her feel worse. Gawking at me, Inspector Lestrade seemed barely to know what he was doing as his right hand rose to accept the tresses of a duke's son. But, where did you find this? With his other hand, he reached for me as to grip me by the elbow and draw me into Basilweather Hall. Stepping back, away from his grasp, I became aware of a third party in the conversation. At the top of the marble stairwell, looming amid balustrades and Grecian columns, Madame Lelia watched and listened. I lowered my voice to answer Inspector Lestrade quite softly. In the first floor, so to speak, of a maple tree with 4 trunks. I pointed in its direction, and he turned to look as I walked away, rather more quickly than a lady should, down the drive towards the gate. "Mrs. Holmes!" he shouted after me. Without altering the rhythm of my pace or looking back, I lifted one hand in a polite but dismissive wave, imitating the way my brother had waggled his walking stick at me. Restraining an impulse to run, I kept walking. When I had passed the gates, I breathed out. Not having ridden in a train before, I was surprised to find the second-class passenger car divided into little parlours, for 4 people each, with the leather seats facing each other as in a carriage. I had imagined something more open, like an omnibus, but not so. A conductor led me down a narrow aisle, opened a door, and willy-nilly, I found myself compartmented with 3 strangers, taking the one remaining place, which faced the rear of the train. Moments later, I felt myself being carried, slowly at first, but moment by moment accelerating, backwards, towards London. All too apt a position as Inspector Lestrade had so reversed my affairs that I could no longer foresee what lay ahead. Since he had talked with a nitwit widow named Enola Holmes, and would tell my brother Sherlock, I needed to abandon my nearly perfect disguise. Indeed, I needed to completely reconsider my situation. Sighing, perched on the edge of my seat, because of my bustle, or rather, luggage, I braced myself against my backwards progress. The train lurched and swayed as it rumbled along at least twice as fast as any bicycle had ever skimmed down any hill. Trees and buildings whipped past the window at a speed so tumultuous they had to avoid looking out. I felt a bit ill, for more than one reason. My safe and comfortable plans for a cab, hotel, genteel lodgings, and quiet waiting would no longer serve. I had been identified, seen. Either Lestrade or my brother Sherlock would trace a young widow's steps through Belvedere, and find that I had gotten onto the afternoon express train to the city. So much for misdirecting my brothers towards Wales. Although they could have no idea of my financial well-being nevertheless, they would know now that I'd gone to London, and there was nothing I could do about it, except leave London as soon as I arrived by the next train to anywhere. But surely my brother would inquire at the ticketing agents, and now my black dress marked me. If Sherlock Holmes found that a widow had gotten on a train to, say, Houndstone, Rockingham, and Puddingsworth, he would investigate, and surely he would find me more easily in Houndstone, Rockingham, Puddingsworth, or any such place than in London. Moreover, I wanted to go to London. Not that I thought Mother was there. Quite the opposite, actually. But I would best be able to find her from there. And as I had always dreamt of London, palaces, fountains, cathedrals, theatres, operas, gentlemen in tails, and ladies dripping with diamonds. Also, and rumbling backwards towards the great city, I found myself smiling beneath my veil at this thought. The idea of hiding beneath my brothers' noses appealed all the more now that they knew. I would revise their opinion of the cranial capacity of their accidental younger sister. Very well, London it was. But circumstances had changed so that I could not, upon arriving in the city, take a cab. Sherlock Holmes would inquire of the cab drivers. Therefore, I would have to walk. And night was coming on, but I could not allow myself a hotel room. Surely my brother would inquire at all the hotels. I would have to walk for quite a distance to get myself well away from the railway station. But where to go? If I took the wrong street, I might find myself in company with someone who was not a very nice sort of person. I might encounter a pickpocket, or perhaps even a cutthroat. Most unpleasant. And just as I thought this, averting my eyes from the dizzying scene outside the train's window, I glanced up instead at the glass in the corridor door. I very nearly screamed. There, like a full moon rising, a large face peered into the compartment. With his nose actually pressed against the glass, the man looked in, scanning every occupant in turn. With no change in his cold expression, he fixed his shadowy gaze on me. Then he turned away and moved on. Gulping, I looked around at my fellow passengers to see whether they too were frightened. It appeared not. In the seat next to me, a workman in a cap sprawled snoring, his rough, square-toed boots thrust out into the middle of the floor. Opposite him, a fellow of shepherd-plaid trousers and Homburg hat studied a newspaper which, judging by etchings of jockeys and horses, concerned itself with the racetrack. And next to him, opposite me, a squat old woman fixed me with a cheery gaze. "What's the matter, Ducky?" she inquired. Ducky, a most peculiar mode of address, but I let it pass, asking merely, "Who was that man?" "What man, Dux?" Either she hadn't seen him at all, or it was perfectly normal for large, bold men wearing cloth caps to peer into railway parlours, and I was being a fool. Shaking my head dismissively, I murmured, "No harm done," although my heart declared me a liar. "You're looking a bit white under all that black," my new acquaintance declared. Common toothless crone, instead of a proper hat, she wore a huge old-fashioned bonnet with a brim that flared like a fungus, tied with an orange ribbon under her bristly chin. Instead of a dress, she wore a fur wrap gone half bald, a blouse somewhat less than white, an old purple skirt with a new braid stuck on its faded hem. Peering at me like a robin hopeful of crumbs, she coaxed, "There's a recent loss, Ducky." "Oh." She wanted to know about my fictitious, dear departed husband. I nodded. "And now you're bound to London?" Nod. "It's the old story, isn't it, Dux?" The vulgar old woman leaned towards me with as much glee as pity. "Catch yourself a likely un. You did, but now he's dead." Such was the brutal word she used. "Gone and died on you he has, and left you without the means to feed yourself. And ye, as ye looking so sick, maybe with his child in your belly." At first I could scarcely understand. Then never having heard anything so unwhisperable stated out loud, and in a public place, yet in the presence of men, although neither of them seemed to notice, I found myself shocked, speechless. A fiery flush heated my face. My friendly tormentor seemed to consider my blush to be affirmation. Nodding, she leaned ever closer to me. "And now you're thinking you can find yourself summer to support you in the city? Have you ever been to London before, my dear?" I managed to shake my head. "Well, don't go making the old mistake, Ducky, no matter what the gentleman's promise." She leaned closer as if to tell me a great secret, yet did not lower her voice. "If you need a few pennies to your pocket, here's the dodge. Take a petticoat or two out from under your dress." I truly thought I would faint. The workman blessedly snored on, but the other man unmistakably lifted his newspaper to hide his face. "Won't never miss 'em," the toothless crone gabbled on. "Why, many's a woman in London hasn't got a petticoat to her name, and you with half a dozen. I warrant by the puffing and the rustling of 'em." I desperately wanted the journey and this ordeal to end, so much so that I risked a look at the window. Houses upon houses whisked past the glass now, and taller buildings pressed together, brick to stone. "Take 'em to Colhane's used clothing on St. Tooking's Lane, off Kipple Street," relentlessly continued the hag, whose squat presence now reminded me more of a toad than a robin. "Down in the East End, you know. You can smell your way there from by the docks. And mind, once you find St. Tooking's Lane, don't go to one of them other dealers, but straight to Colhane's, where you get a fair sum for you petticoats, if them's real silk." The man with the newspaper rattled it and cleared his throat. Gripping the edge of my seat, I leaned away from the shocking hag as far as my bustle would allow. "Thank you," I muttered, for while I had no intention of selling my petticoats, nevertheless this dreadful common old woman had helped me. I had been wondering how I was to dispose of my widow's clothing and get something else. Of course, I had plenty of money to order anything I wanted, but the construction of clothing takes time. Moreover, surely my brother would inquire of the established seamstresses, and surely I would be remembered, if all clad in black, I were fitting for anything except more black, or grey with perhaps a touch of lavender or white. After the first year in mourning, that was all one was supposed to wear. Yet given my brother's cleverness, none of what that would do. I could not merely modify my appearance. I needed to transform it completely. But how? Pluck garments of washing lines? Now I knew. Used clothing shops, St. Tooking's Lane, off Kipple Street, in the East End. I did not think my brother was likely to inquire there, nor did I think, as I should have, that I would risk my life venturing there.